Hey, Kevin here, Mr. DIY Dork from DIYDork.com. Today I want to show you how you can make wood stain in your kitchen using some really simple, cheap materials, and you can actually get some really cool results with this. So check this out. I think you're going to like it. Alright, so let me show you just how easy this really is to make. First thing you're going to need is a glass jar with a lid that will actually seal on it. Now, I got this mason jar at a thrift store for only 50 cents, but you could even use like an old pickle jar or something like that. I've used them before. It'll work just fine, as long as the lid will actually seal to the jar. Okay, you also need some real steel wool, and I recommend either getting fine or extra fine grit. You just want to make sure that it's actual steel and it's not like some type of plastic or synthetic. And you also don't want like an SOS pad that has the soap built into it. You just want plain Jane steel wool. Okay, you also want just plain white vinegars. The stuff like you have under your cabinet or in your cupboard. This is what you want, just the plain stuff. And then you also want a coffee filter. And we're going to use this later just to filter out some of the gunk that gets left in our mixture. And you don't absolutely have to. I don't use these all the time, but I'd recommend it just so you get a little cleaner stain later. So basically what we're going to do is we're going to end up mixing these, and I've got kind of a little recipe I use, and you're going to mix them in the jar, and it's almost like making sun tea or like making pickles, and a little chemistry happens when it's sealed in there, and for the most part it basically starts to rust. And then when you apply it on the wood, it mixes with something in wood called tannins, and it gives it a different color depending on how long it actually sat in the jar. So I'll show you my recipe I use, and then I'll show you some test results I got after using this. I think you'd be surprised at how many different shades and tones you can actually get out of this stuff. So check this out. All right, so let me show you the recipe that I actually use. First thing to do is just get your jar, take off the lid, and then you want to measure out 2 cups of the white vinegar, and then just pour it in the jar, and that's it. So let me pour in there. There's 1 cup. Let me get my 2nd cup here. All right. And then you just want to grab your steel wool and take out a bundle. And then this is where you can kind of go 2 different ways. I've tested both out, and basically you can either tear one of these little bundles of steel wool in half and just use half of it, or you can use the whole thing. Now after testing, I actually found that using the whole bundle of steel wool, basically a 1-to-2 ratio, 2 cups of vinegar to 1 bundle, got a real nice rich color, and actually got some really interesting different tones in the first several hours of making the stain. So to test out, I probably recommend 1 full bundle to the 2 cups. Now another thing I like to do is actually open it up and then tear it apart so that's a little fuzzier, it's not so compact, so that the vinegar can actually get to all of it a lot sooner, so it can start to work a little faster. So I just tear it up and I stuff it in there, and then we'll just shake it up a little bit, and then that's it. So that's the recipe right there, no big deal at all. Let me find out. Okay, here's my lid. So put it up and shake it up a little bit, let it kind of settle, and then that's it. You're just going to let it sit for several hours before you even want to test it. Now I also recommend, as soon as you make it, is to write down the time that you made it. Like for me right now it's 3:15 in the afternoon, so in several hours I can check it and see if it's the right color, do a little testing, and then you go from there. So you just want to make sure you know exactly what time you made it. And to be honest, 3 in the afternoon is probably a little late. You actually probably want to make this in the morning if you want to use it in the first several hours, because you can get some really interesting colors that are not necessarily brown. So what we'll do next is I'll show you some of the testing I did, and just some of the colors I got out of it, and it's actually pretty cool. So check this out. All right, so right before I show you how to use this and the test results I got, I just kind of want to show you what this stuff looks like after it's been sitting for a while, so you kind of know what to look for. Now this is the one I just made, and it's still clear, the steel wool is still great, it hasn't changed whatsoever. It's only been about 15-20 minutes, no big deal. Now this jar right here, the smaller jar, is about 1 week old, and it looks black, but when you apply it on wood, it turns like a real deep, rich brown color. And I want to tell you something about this small jar here in just a second. Okay, now this other jar here, as you can kind of see, there's not a lot here because I've used a whole bunch of it, and there's a lot of gunk in there. That's the stuff you want to filter out with the coffee filter. I didn't happen to do it with this batch. And then, but you notice the color, it's that brown, orange rust color, and it's pretty ugly. And this jar is probably 2.5 weeks old or so. And once it's got this old, it's pretty much no good anymore. Unless you want like a really ugly brown. You don't want, if you want your wood to look like it has barbecue sauce on it, then this might work. But if you want like a nice brown or some grays or whatever, then you want to use it before this time. So this one, like I said, is about a week old, and it's about maxed out for the colors that I like out of this. Any longer, you know, it'll get that kind of rusty color. Now, one thing I want to mention, I should have mentioned this earlier, is you notice I have two different size jars here. They have the same amount though. They both have 2 cups of vinegar and 1 whole bundle, but what happens in the smaller jars, it fills up, you know, the liquid fills up higher, so when you dunk the steel wool in there, it's mostly all under there, and it stays under the liquid so that it gets a nice deep rich color. Now this one here, about half the steel wool is under the liquid, so the top stuff will actually, over time, it'll start to rust. It'll kind of turn orange, so when you mix it up, it won't quite turn this color, but it'll get more of this orangey brown tone than more of the like deep brown black tones. So maybe finding a smaller like jelly jar like this would be the way to go for you if you want like deep rich colors. But you could also use a bigger jar like this, maybe if you doubled the recipe and you did 4 cups of vinegar and 2 bundles of the steel wool in there. But I just wanted to mention that to you real quick. So now let me show you how to use this stuff, and then I'll show you test results. I got some really cool colors out of this, and I was actually really surprised. I think you're gonna like it too, so we'll do that next. All right, so applying it is gonna be really easy once you get to the color that you want. Now I recommend to test to use a brush. I'm actually using a foam brush because I don't want to ruin one of my good brushes. But you can even apply it with just an old rag, or you can, once it gets to a color that you like, you can filter it through a coffee filter into a fresh new jar, and then pour it into a spray bottle, and then you can spray it. But I prefer just using either a rag or a brush, but I'll just use a brush here today. So I'm used to stuff that's about a week old, and this is just some unfinished pine right here, and I know it has a little stain from earlier testing. But all I'm doing is I'm dipping it in there, and then you apply it, and check that. Look how clear that is. You can't even tell I'm hardly putting it on there. It just looks like I don't know how it looks on the camera, but from my perspective, it looks like I'm putting water on there. So you apply it on there, and 1 coat is usually fine. 2 coats, it'll start to look powdery when it dries, and you can get deeper colors that way. But I'll just show you what this 1 coat looks like. So I'll let this dry for a little bit, and then check out how dark this actually gets. It's pretty cool stuff. All right, now here it is. I'll let it dry. This is a really super light pine. It's almost white colored, and they got this nice rich brown color. If you remember, when I put it on, it just looked like I was putting water on there. It was really light. So when it dried, it reacted, and it turned this really cool brown. Now it also depends on what type of wood you use, and I'll show you that in some of my results I got from testing. So we'll move on to that next. All right, now check this out. This is the results I got after testing it over time. Now I'm sure it's not totally in the camera view there, but basically what I did is I just have, you know, plain pine boards here, really light color, just like that one I just used, and I just have it just bare right here, and then I tested it at 2 hours, 4 hours, 6 hours, 8 hours, 12 hours. Then I started skipping every 6 hours to 18, to 24, and then I did every 12 hours to 36, 48, 60, and then I went to 72 hours, and then I went 4 days and 5 days. So up to this point is what it does within 3 days. And then day 4 and 5, it's a little bit darker and starts to kind of max out. Now the reason I have 3 sets here is because and it probably doesn't show up in the camera real well, but on the bottom halves of these boards, I finished it in a different type of clear. So this one has a water-based clear on the bottom, and you can probably see it here on this piece here, how it richens the color a little bit. So that's all water-based clear. And I have oil-based clear here. You can especially see down here how it changes a little bit, and you see a little more wood grain. Because when the stuff dries, it gets a little powdery looking because it's like a rust coat. And then whenever it wets down with the clear coat, you can see a lot more of the grain. So that's over time too. And then this one down here, I used a paste finishing wax. And this one really didn't change it much. And if anything, it kind of made it hazy looking. And it's probably not really the best looking stuff for this. I recommend either oil-based clear or water-based clear. Now another thing I want to point out is you can kind of tell that even though these are all pine boards, the results are a little bit different. Like look right here at 24 hours. And this board, it's, you know, nice, kind of a light medium brown. Here it's slightly darker, and then here it got really dark. Now I'm guessing it's because this board has a touch of red to it. This one's really white. This one has a little bit of red. You can especially see here. I suppose that's the tannins in the wood, and that's why it got a little darker. And it's just really cool. It goes from, you know, this is just plain, and then within 2 hours, it already starts to turn kind of gray. So I would say within that first about 6 to 8 hours, a lot of people like to do that kind of distressed, weathered barnwood look. And I would say within that first 8 hours, maybe 12 hours or so, you can get a nice gray. And it also depends on the type of wood. So now let me show you the testing I did on different types of wood, and I got some really cool results. Now this is where things get really interesting. I decided to test the stain on a couple of pieces of common wood that I found on some of the furniture projects that I've messed with. So I have a piece of pine right here that's a little more red than the others I had earlier, and then a piece of maple and a piece of oak. I got some really interesting results. What I did was I tested it every 12 hours. So I went at 12, 24, 36, 48, 60, 72, which would be 3 days right here. Then I skipped to 4 days, and then I skipped to 5 days. And you know, after about a week or so, 5, 6, 7 days, it kind of maxes out a little bit, and then it starts turning that rust color, or it'll turn kind of a black. It just kind of depends. But for the most part, you have about a week's worth of time to work with this stuff. But I was really impressed in the first 24 hours. I got some really cool gray colors that I was not expecting whatsoever. And if you want to do a furniture project and get that kind of driftwood, distressed barn wood type look, that 24 hours or even more, like 12 or even 8 hours, you'll get a really cool gray. Now, especially on this oak. I couldn't believe the color we got out of that. It's like a really awesome medium gray. There's a little bit of a blue to it. At 24 hours, it gets a little more purple. And then 36 and 48, it's shifting towards brown, but it's still kind of purple. Now, even on the oak, I was impressed, or I mean on the pine here, I was impressed with the gray that we got. Comparing it to the one I showed you earlier. I should also point out that these 3 pieces, when I tested it, I changed the formula just a little bit to 2 cups of vinegar to a whole bundle. And when I did these, I only used a half bundle of steel wool, and I found that the full bundle gave it a richer color with a small jar like I showed you earlier. So check this out right here, 12 hours. This one on the original test is, you know, kind of a light brown, but on this new test, it's more of a gray, which I really am into that a lot. And at 24 hours, it's kind of a gray brown, while here it's just, you know, straight up kind of a light medium brown. So I was really impressed with the update to the recipe here, and just some really cool colors, especially these grays. I'm definitely going to use them on some upcoming projects I got going on. So anyway, I hope you like this. It was really easy to make, super cheap. You probably have this stuff in your house already. You know, you may not have a jar, but no big deal at all. And the cool thing is this stuff doesn't smell toxic. You know, it does kind of smell like a weird metal, you know, because that's what it is. It's like vinegar and metal put together. So it has a little weird smell, but once it dries, it smells absolutely like nothing. And then the other thing is that it dries really quick. It's like water, you know, as soon as it evaporates, it's pretty much dry. So, you know, it will soak into the wood a little bit, so you want it to dry, you know, maybe 2 hours or so, but it doesn't have to be like, you know, 6 hours or whatever oil-based stuff would take. So anyway, I hope you like this a lot. I'll show you some projects I've actually used this on with different, you know, I've done it at different times and on different types of wood, and I got some really cool results. So I'll show that to you, and then also want to remember to tell you to go ahead and subscribe, and you can check out more videos like this, and you know, just keep updated with all the things I'm doing. So I want to thank you for watching this. I'll show you a couple of samples, and remember to subscribe, guys. So thanks a lot.